Gadot. Gadot. So Wonder Woman, huge success, really impressive, great reviews. Certainly the best reviewed in the DC Universe franchise of films, which then left the door open for, the possibility that maybe they were gonna make a good Justice League movie. Sure, it was going to bring in the characters from the movies that had been less impressive, but, we kind of had hints on the characters who were filling in. Flash seemed to have potential. The villain wasn't really exciting in that sense of, oh, they're going to have Steppenwolf. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, we can't wait to see Steppenwolf. He's a Darkseid lackey. But while Wonder Woman was the film that proved you could do a good DC movie within this DC universe that they've created, we've had proof in the past of good Batman and good Superman movies, but in this particular situation, with the DC cinematic universe that was established with Man of Steel, Wonder Woman proved that, yeah, you could tell a great story even within those confines. And so what we find ourselves now dealing with was the next step. Because really, Wonder Woman proved it could be done. Wonder Woman didn't prove that after this, it's all smooth sailing. They've got the kinks worked out. They know what they want. And it's going to be good stuff all the way out. That was really going to fall on Justice League. Justice League had Zack Snyder returning, which, I think gave people hesitation because it was his two films that kind of had people the most frustrated with what we were getting so far. Was he going to carry through the Wonder Woman stuff? He was involved in that story too. Would he be carrying this forward, and would Wonder Woman influence his work on Justice League? And so the filming began on Justice League, but then shortly after the primary filming had completed, when they had initially wrapped, they started to do reshoots, and then a personal tragedy forced him to reevaluate if he could continue on with the series. And he and his wife, Deborah, who is a producer, and they've been producing partners for, years, they opted in agreement with DC and Warner Brothers to step down, and so that they could take time to deal with what happened. And I just want to take a moment here. My heart goes out to Zach and Deborah, because my dad died we're nearing on 3 years, and I can tell you something, folks. If you haven't experienced a close loved one's death, it never gets normal. You adjust, you kind of go through, but you don't stop thinking about it. And I think doubly so with a child. And so really, I just feel a tremendous empathy and sympathy for the Snyders, and just hope they're able to find the strength to get through the initial pain and grief to you know. So I just felt like that's something worth saying. I know they're not going to see this. I know it's not like, you know, I have contact with them, but I felt like it was something worth saying, whether he's going to hear this or not. And so DC brought in Joss Whedon. There's a certain bit of humor to that. While Whedon didn't get a directorial credit, that still went to Snyder. Whedon is, of course, the guy who directed Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron. On top of that, he did have comic experience, which was, again, mostly with Marvel, through Astonishing X-Men, Runaways. He also was running the show for his for a comic continuing his creation, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This, of course, led to more reshoots, which resulted in a lot of rumors about what those reshoots were really entailing. A lot of belief is that it was tone stuff, things to lighten the mood, and you can certainly see that lightened mood touch in there. It's also a brighter film. It's less dark and grim looking. I would say Cyborg is a character who's probably most familiar to the non-comic book public for the cartoons related to the Teen Titans on Nickelodeon. And other than that, I mean, he's in the comics also as a member of the Justice League. But even that's fairly, like, within the last few years type of invention. But I like what Ray Fisher does with him. The character seems to be... He's a character trying to come to terms with the fact that he really doesn't feel human at all anymore. That the accident that has now deprived him of most of his body, the alien technology has overtaken him, and he's not sure when and what is him versus what is the alien. And that works really well. Fisher's performance is good in that. And the effects look pretty decent for the most part on that. Now, there seems to be some division on two characters. And these are the two characters that I seem to see people either loving and hating. And it's always split down the middle pretty much. One is people hate Bro Aquaman. They don't like his whole, kind of surfer guy thing. And I don't know. I still always like this moment.
Just like a bat. I dig it.
And then, really, I like the uniform. I think the uniform that they get, his costume is pretty nice. It's kind of a kingly type armor, but it still has the the gold tinted scales kind of evoke the old style costume. I like that, and generally speaking, I like Momoa's performance. I liked what he did. The other one is Flash, and I will admit, I mean, Flash it seems to either be high point, great character, loved him, or he was so irritating. And I'm definitely on the mostly high point. I would have preferred, I think, I could have done without the whole phobia obsession. He talks a lot about his phobias, his fears of dying in different ways, and that just didn't really work for me. But overall, I thought Ezra Miller was funny in the role. I thought he seemed like a decent, his Barry Allen seemed nice enough. And what I really liked was something that actually kind of reminded me of the comic book version of Quicksilver. Long ago, Peter David wrote a story in which Quicksilver was the member of a team called X Factors, and he was always just kind of irritated with people. He wasn't very friendly. He was condescending, and they did an issue where everybody sat down with a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist was, asking him questions, and everybody would answer. And it was one of those issues. It was a surprisingly compelling issue in general, but Quicksilver was kind of revelatory. So, like, the psychiatrist asks Quicksilver why he's irritable. And his response is basically, well, how do you feel when you're in line at the DMV? The psychiatrist doesn't like it. And his basic core answer is, every minute of my life is being stuck in line at the DMV. And I thought, wow, that is brilliant. What a great characterization and explanation for why a character is unpleasant and irritable. Whereas, now with the Flash, what they did was a lot different. It's a similar general concept. He's moving faster. He's thinking faster than everyone else.
Together a team, people with special abilities. You see, I believe enemies are coming.
Stop right there. I'm in.
You are?
Yeah, I need friends.
And I find that works really well. The character's kind of fidgety and talks really rapidly and seems always ahead of himself. So I think they did a really solid job overall in character motivation. Now, the villain. DC's kind of had the same problem as Marvel, where their villains aren't really that compelling. Zod was okay, and that was mostly the performance of Michael Shannon. Steppenwolf is a perfectly well performed character. The actor Ciarán Hinds does the best he can with the role. Now, the Justice League was originally slated to be a two-parter, and I think that's why they had made the choice of Steppenwolf. I suspect the real plan was, in part 2, the real threat was going to show up. The guy who is behind it all, Darkseid. And I think, just as Marvel had done with their planned two-part Avengers Infinity War, and then suddenly it became Avengers Infinity War and Avengers 4 Untitled at this time, they decided there that they weren't going to do a part 2. And now there's even talk that DC won't be doing Darkseid at all in their cinematic worlds. The belief, anyways, is that it's got a lot to do with Thanos being the big bad for Marvel. Now, of course, that might not be true anymore because, after all, they've announced a New Gods movie. Darkseid is one of the New Gods. It wouldn't make sense to skip out and not have him. But I do suspect that cutting him for now is what led to this Steppenwolf feeling somewhat toothless. And, I mean, he's a minion and you kind of get that, but the movie doesn't play him up as a minion overall. I just felt like he's not an exciting villain. But I will say something that I really enjoyed in the film, Superman smiles more. And then there's this scene.
You're all too weak to see the truth.
Well, I believe in truth. But I'm also a big fan of justice.
Of course, Wonder Woman shines yet again. No surprise there. And she's great in the film. Gal Gadot does a really good job. I enjoy what little Lois and Clark stuff we get. And what little also between Clark and his mom and Lois and Clark's mom. I mean, there's a nice little, with the three of them, we get a little bit. And frankly, what with Joss Whedon being the guy who was overseeing things, we should probably be pretty relieved that we didn't end up with at least one of those women being killed or just totally destroying the relationship between Lois and Clark entirely, because bad things happening in relationships is what makes good drama, is always an adage that has been a big part of Joss Whedon's work, and by golly, it's one of the things he is into that I actually find very frustrating and annoying. So I kind of feel like, while sure, if I wanted to draw things out, I could get more in depth on Justice League. But what it comes down to is I did enjoy the movie. It's not as strong as Wonder Woman, but it does still make me feel like they're starting to find some footing, and maybe they're on the upswing. So now that we're coming to the end of part 6, I apologize because I sure didn't realize it was going to be this long when I scripted it. But our final chapter will be part 7, and that's going to just kind of look at the future of the franchise, some of the movies that are coming up, and some of my thoughts on a certain aspect as related to one of the upcoming movies that's being spun out of Justice League. So, just one more video in this series, and if you've actually stayed this far, thanks a lot. See you next time.